What's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan. In this video I've got a 2012 Ford Escape. This particular 2012 Ford Escape actually belongs to my mom, so no pressure there. She's been complaining recently that the car has a little bit of what sounds like an exhaust leak, where the exhaust is kind of getting louder, starting to smell a little bit on the inside of the car. So she actually had it checked out a few months ago. Took it to a local repair shop who said that she needed a new catalytic converter and it was going to cost her about $1,200. So she held off on the repair at the time and kind of let it go over the summer, and it's only gotten worse and worse. So I decided to take a look at it for her real quick and see what we had going on, see if it was really necessary to spend the $1,200 on the exhaust. And I'll show you exactly what we found, what was going on. And as you can see here, we have a few pieces of the exhaust that we're going to be replacing today. So we'll run through all that in just a moment. But before I get started, if this video is helpful to you, please consider hitting the like button, showing me a little bit of love, and subscribe to the channel so that you know when I drop new content. All right, so here we are underneath the car. There's the front of the car. So what you see up there is the flange at the front of the catalytic converter. And basically what I did is I got under here and just kind of did a quick visual inspection to see if there's anything obvious. I didn't see anything that was really super obvious. I mean, there's a decent amount of surface rust all throughout the exhaust, but all in all, it looks pretty solid, especially considering it's, you know, a daily driven Michigan car. It's seen, 10 years of Michigan winters. So I didn't see a whole lot visibly at first. What I ended up doing was getting under here, having the car started. I actually had my mom or my dad apply a little bit of gas, kind of get some exhaust really flowing through the pipe. And I did end up finding at this middle muffler here, this muffler assembly, at this seam, it didn't look this bad when I was looking at it a couple months ago. I noticed that there was a little bit of an air puff kind of coming out of the top. I actually put my hand up there. You could feel, the exhaust puffing right out at the seam there. And then taking a closer look, see if you can see this. You can see there's actually what looks like little fibers of the muffler assembly starting to pop out of that seam there, and there's a pretty obvious crack at the top. So that was the most obvious breach of the exhaust that I could find. And I see why the repair shop said that they want to do the catalytic converter. Basically, what I think they wanted to do was replace this entire assembly, which, in my opinion, is doing it the right way. This whole pipe would be one piece if you're getting it from the dealership and replacing an OE part. Basically, what you have is starting at that flange up there. Let me back up for a second. So you have the exhaust manifold coming off the engine, and then for some reason, two down pipes instead of one. There's two separate smaller down pipes that come to this flange. After this flange, you have one big piece that is your catalytic converter right here, and then a middle muffler or sort of resonator assembly. I think this is actually maybe a muffler. And then this middle resonator muffler assembly, which goes back to that flange there. And then the rear section after that flange is just one more muffler, and then goes right out to the tailpipe. So what I think they wanted to do was probably do with the OE repair and replace the factory part, which included the catalytic converter. Now, the catalytic converter in this case is still in one piece. Everything looks great. I don't see any leaks there. There's no, trouble codes or catalytic efficiency issues or anything like that. So I started looking around to see what my options were as far as replacing the exhaust, and this is what I found. So at the high end of the spectrum, looking the dealer route and getting the OEM Ford part, which would include this entire pipe assembly going from flange to flange, they were looking, I think it was about $800 to $900 for the part itself, because it includes that catalytic converter, which is pretty expensive. Another option would have been to go to a muffler fabrication shop or a shop that specializes in making custom exhaust. But even that option was also looking a little pricey for having this middle section replaced. So I ended up going the cheapest route. This car is about 10, 11 years old now, so not 100% sure, how much longer they want to keep it, or, if they're gonna, replace it anytime soon, or if they're gonna keep it for a few more years. So basically what we ended up doing was finding a third option, which I'll show you now. So the cheapest and probably most cost-effective option in this case was to go with a prefabricated exhaust. This particular one's from Walker Exhaust Systems. And I got this from a local parts store that I do a decent amount of business with. Basically what's gonna happen, instead of replacing that entire middle section, this requires me to cut the pipe right after the catalytic converter. And then this sleeve here is gonna slide onto that pipe, just ahead of where that muffler that's currently leaking would sit. So that's gonna slide on there, get bolted down with a, I think that's a 2 1/4 inch exhaust clamp. And you see this whole assembly has resonator, muffler, and everything built in. Now this is supposed to plug and play with the factory exhaust, that rear section that has that, tailpipe and the last muffler in the line. Being that it's aftermarket, I don't trust it 100% sure that it's going to be as plug and play as they say it is. So just to be on the safe side, I've gotten the Walker alternative for that rear tailpipe and muffler. So I'm not dead in the water. If I get this middle section in, for some reason doesn't work with the OEM front and rear sections, then I can just throw on that rear muffler and we'll be good to go. Best case scenario, if everything plugs and plays, great. And I'm able to reuse the rear section of the exhaust and I can return that and get my money back. But all in all, even if I end up using this middle section, the rear section, and then all of the hardware, we have a gasket, spring bolt kit for the rear flange, and then just a 1 clamp for the front, it's still only about $300. So definitely a lot cheaper than the $1,200 that they were originally quoted. Should get them by just as well for the next several years without any issues. And take care of an exhaust leak and any fumes that are getting into the cabin. Now, I should know this car's not driven a whole lot these days, so that's the only reason why we pushed off as long as we have on this. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend anybody with an exhaust leak drive a car any more than they have to, because of those fumes working their way into the cabin. If you start smelling exhaust gas coming into your car, get the exhaust taken care of as soon as you can. One more thing to note, this Escape has the Inline 4, I think it's a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine. This car came with both a 4-cylinder and a V6, I think it's a 3-liter V6. According to the Walker catalogs, everything I've looked at online, everything after the catalytic converter, so basically if you're buying everything aftermarket, you can get a Walker catalytic converter that would plug and play right here at the front of this pipe. But for both cars, V6 or Inline 4, everything from that point back, so this pipe basically starting to the rear of the car, it's all the same parts. So hopefully this guide, if my research is correct and everything that I've read online seems to be true, this guide will not only work for the Inline 4 Escapes in this case, but also for the V6 Escapes, because they're supposedly, again, according to Walker, use all the same exhaust parts for both vehicles all the way back. And as far as I can tell, I don't see any notes mentioning all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive. This car is a front-wheel drive, but the way the exhaust is routed, I don't think the presence of all-wheel drive or not has any impact on what kind of exhaust system you get. So from everything I can tell, all-wheel drive or not, Inline 4 or V6, you're gonna be looking at a very similar setup if you're replacing your exhaust. So outside of needing a Sawzall for that catalytic converter, might need like a couple pairs of pliers for these exhaust hangers or insulators. I know they make a special pair of pliers that can get those off, specifically made for those. I don't have a pair of those right now, so I'm hoping a pair of channel locks and I don't know, maybe some silicone spray or something like that will kind of work those free. And then for this back section here, it's just those two nuts, that spring bolt kit, those are two 13mm nuts. Just be careful when you're releasing those. They're under a little bit of tension because of those springs. But shouldn't be too crazy, but just watch yourself when you're releasing the tension on those. So I've got these two nuts off with the spring bolts, and still not separating 100%. I know that there's still some tension from the hangers holding it on to the joint there. But basically what I'm going to do is get my pry bar in here. There we go. Just kind of break them free just to make sure that everything's loose. So the rear part's good. I'm going to get the new pipe under here and kind of eyeball where I want to cut by the catalytic converter. All right, so I have the new exhaust lined up kind of the best I can by eyeball with where the old one's hanging right now. So coming up here, you can see it looks like we're probably going to need at least this much of the old pipe left. So probably cut right about here. What I might do is kind of come an inch or so away from the front of this resonator. I do see on the new pipe, there's a decent amount of room to work with here, but it looks like it kind of flares in a little bit. So what I'd like to do is cut it right at this resonator muffler here and leave as much pipe as I can to work with. My concern is if I leave too much pipe, then it might hit where this pipe kind of indents in, and then I might have to make a second cut. Not the end of the world. Worst thing to, if I have to do that. But when you have just this small stub here and you're trying to kind of hold this and cut with one hand, it might get a little tricky. So I think, I think what I'll do is I'll probably go about an inch in, maybe right here or so. That should line up, hopefully right before where that flange starts on the new pipe. And then we'll have plenty of metal to work with there still. But definitely do this step before you start cutting. Once you start cutting into the factory system, the old system, you're pretty much committed. You want to kind of take a measure twice, cut once approach when you get into this step. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. We're going to go ahead and grab a Sawzall. You can use whatever tool you want to cut it, whether you have like a chain cutter, cut-off wheel. I think a Sawzall is probably going to be the easiest thing in here with a shorter blade, so I don't hit that that heat shield or cause any damage to the underside of the car. So yeah, it should be just a pretty simple cut. Get that part free, and then we'll work on getting these hangers free. All right, so we are free. We've cut all the way through. There's a bit of a tension from the pipe assembly pushing forward on the catalytic converter, so that's why I can't break it free 100% just yet. So what I'm going to do is free up that rear connection, disconnect that rear tailpipe assembly completely from that rear flange, and then what I'll probably do is pop that rear hanger down first, and then these two front ones, we'll grease those up a little bit, maybe spray some sort of WD-40 or silicone grease on there, and then this whole section should just slide back off the hangers and come free. So I'm going to try using a pair of channel locks here. Basically just get one side on the back of the bushing there, the insulator, and then just kind of poke the stud through the other side, just like that. All right, what I'm actually going to do is probably get a jack stand or something to put underneath this pipe here just to support it for the time being. All right, so with that rear section supported on the jack stand, now I can focus on getting these two front ones free. realized I sprayed the wrong side of these studs. Even I make mistakes sometimes. All right, so our old midsection there, or intermediate pipe, or whatever we want to call that, is free. Grab a flashlight, you can see we're cut up at the catalytic converter there. I did have one little section there that was still hanging on, so I had to kind of twist this metal pipe side to side until it broke free. And then at the back here, we still have our flange coming off the rear section. So what I'd like to do inside that flange there, I might take a die grinder or a piece of sandpaper, just try to clean up the inside of that sealing surface. Specifically this beveled area right inside where the gasket's going to sit. I just want to make sure it's going to seal pretty well. If for some reason there's a lot of rust and I can't get it to clean up the best, then I'll use a little bit of muffler cement or exhaust cement in there to kind of fill in the any little pits or divots or anything like that. So we'll get this old exhaust out of here. We'll get the new exhaust in, and we're gonna keep our fingers crossed that it plays nice, slips right onto the catalytic converter, and then bolts right up to that rear section. A couple things to note on the catalytic converter here. You want to make sure you're clean of all burrs, especially on the outside. You can see I got a pretty noticeable one hanging down on the bottom there. So I'm going to take a file, or I'm going to die grinder to it, and just clean up the outer edge there real quick, because that's going to slide on the inside of the new pipe. And then at the rear, if you're replacing the spring bolt kit, you're going to have to hammer out these studs here, preferably with an air hammer. It's going to be very difficult to do with a regular handheld hammer, sledge, or anything like that. So if you have an air hammer, great. Luckily for me in this scenario, those two studs are actually in pretty good shape. Not a lot of rust on them. So instead of opening Pandora's box tonight, I think what I'm going to do is just reuse all that old hardware. I put a little copper paste on the nuts in case I ever have to take them off and replace them down the road. But they're in good enough shape. I feel pretty good about reusing them. And then that's a few bucks there. We can also get back not using the new spring bolt kit. But I will replace that gasket no matter what. The old one's in pretty rough shape, a little bit of rust on it. I wouldn't trust that to seal if I put it back on, so we will be replacing the gasket back there. So I wanted to get a quick look at this old exhaust while we had it off the car. And I'm glad, it's making me feel good that we replaced it when we did. This rear mounting point isn't too bad. But these two front mounting points here, you can see are pretty rusty. In fact, this one here almost looks like it was about ready to let go at one point, and not much better on this side. But the main thing that kind of alarmed me is you can see this little dark line here. That's our crack where it's been leaking from. If I hold the exhaust and kind of grab this top part and wiggle it, there's a lot of movement there. And I think one good pothole, one good deep, good old-fashioned Michigan pothole might have broken that exhaust system right in half. So I'm glad we're replacing this when we are. It'll be a little peace of mind for my folks as they're driving this car around. Peace of mind for me being the one that works on the car. So enough with this thing. This is going to go out in the trash or throw in the pile with my other scrap metal, and figure out what to do with it later. All right, so what I've done is I tried to clean up the inside of that flange like I said I was going to. I actually ended up taking a die grinder to it. And you can see it cleaned up pretty well, but there's still a fair amount of pitting going on, I think, just from a little bit of surface rust over the years. So what I'm actually gonna do is, before I tighten that flange down, is I'm gonna use a little bit of this muffler paste, or muffler cement. Basically gonna take a little bit of my finger, squeeze it out, and it's pretty nasty stuff to work with, but I've used it before. It works pretty well, especially in situations like this. We have a lot of rust, or you know, kind of a weird setup that's not an OE guaranteed fit exhaust. You're gonna get a little bit on your finger and just kind of smear it around the inside. Just a light little film that's gonna go between the new metal gasket and the surface that you see there. So I'm gonna wait to do that since this muffler is gonna be kind of a handful to put in, and that rear tailpipe I think is gonna give us enough wiggle room that I can do that after the fact. So in addition to cleaning up that surface, come up here by the catalytic converter, I took a file to the area where I cut and kind of smooth that down, so we shouldn't have any issues sliding the new pipe on. So I've got the new pipe sitting here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try sliding it onto that pipe first. Also have to kind of navigate through these two hangers, and then probably end up having to prop it on this jack stand for the time being until I can get to this back section. So I'm going to set the phone down, set the camera down, and see if I can't throw the needle on all three of those at once. So I see why this thing was fighting me so bad. You can see we got part of this the top part of the pipe there. Looks like somebody must have dropped it or got bumped around during shipping, or who knows what happened there. But basically this opening is a little oblonged, preventing me from sliding it over the catalytic converter. So what I'm trying to do is I have a small hand sledgehammer that kind of fits perfectly in this bore. It's a square shape, so I don't want to do too much with it, or else I might kind of oblong it in other areas. But basically what I'm trying to do is get it in there, the tall point, on the square edge here, and just kind of use that to round out that corner. Not the preferred way to do it. If you're doing a lot of exhaust work, I recommend getting, they make a metal cone. I think it's made out of steel that drops right into the exhaust. All you have to do is hammer it perfectly round all the way around. It would take care of that in a few good hard whacks. Unfortunately, I don't have anything like that with me right now. I've tried looking around for other cone-shaped objects, you know, old spray paint cans, anything that would fit in that hole, and everything is just too small in diameter. So worst case scenario, I might have to get a pair of vice grips or something, or just basically do what I have to kind of round out this edge. But something to keep in mind when you're doing exhaust work like this is always check your new parts before you get started. I didn't do it in this case. I figured it'd be good to go. But you can see that's kind of turned around to bite me now. So I'm going to do the best I can, kind of round this out by hand, just enough to the point where I'll slide over the catalytic converter. And then on a side note too, I also took some silicone grease to the studs there where the insulators are going to hang, just to make them easier to install. So let me see if I can't get this rounded out a little bit more and get this thing installed. All right, guys, so I finally got the exhaust started. Did the best I could to kind of round out that pipe by hand, using a couple hammers. Just kind of working slowly around the perimeter, being careful not to oblong it anymore. But I got enough where I could at least start the pipe. It needs to go on a little bit more than that. So what I'm going to do at the other end of this new section, I'm going to take this dead blow and tap it from the backside, try to drive the pipe forward. I want to use this kind of dead blow so as not to damage the new pipe. I guess you could probably use a regular hammer or sledgehammer or something like that, as long as you put like a block of wood or something to protect. But I'll probably hit right on the back here, hit it forward to seat it a little bit more. And then all of the insulators I have started. I don't think they're really sitting 100%, but as the pipe comes forward, probably be sitting further back right there. So I highly recommend using silicone grease or some sort of lubricant on all of these posts. It'll make your life a lot easier putting those insulator bushings right back on and working with them a little bit more. So I've got the two front ones started. we've got the pipe on it, the catalytic converter. I kind of mocked up the rear flange there. I don't have a gasket in there or anything like that, so that's not final, but I wanted to make sure everything was going to kind of sit okay. This rear hanger looks pretty good. Again, as the pipe comes forward, that will sit even better. But so far, I'm liking the way this is fitting. Everything's looking pretty good. Once I get that pipe slid forward a little bit more on the catalytic converter, I'll be feeling really great about that. But the flange back here is my main concern, if that was going to line up or not. And I think we're in pretty good shape there. So it looks like I won't have to use that rear section of the Walker exhaust. So what I'm going to do is tap the pipe forward, try to get it seated a little bit more at the front here. We don't want to put on our exhaust clamp and lock this in place just yet. That'll probably be the last step, because we want to make sure that we can kind of make, fine tune the adjustments and make sure everything's good. Once the pipe is slid forward, I'm going to probably get a pry bar and try to tilt this section side by side, make sure that the bushings have equal tension on them. I don't want one to be, stretched out and the other one compressed on the other side. They should be hanging down pretty much about the same distance. So we'll get those sorted out. We'll get this rear bushing sorted out later too, and then the gasket, muffler cement, and the spring bolt hardware back there. So let's start by getting this seated. So I gave that new muffler a couple final good whacks off camera, and was able to drive the pipe on a little bit further. So I'm feeling pretty good now with where that's sitting. I'd say probably 2/3 of what was left of the original exhauster is covered by that sleeve. So I think that's going to be more than enough metal for the new exhaust clamp to bite into. And then one thing to note too is that our hangers are pretty much maxed out as far as where they can travel. This is right. That one's actually not on all the way. That one's at the edge of the factory post. And kind of maxed out there on the hanger, as is that one. So they're both sitting pretty comfortable. The one back here is lined up pretty well also, and then the rear flange is still looking good. So I'm feeling pretty good with the way everything's sitting. Next thing I did is I checked to make sure that this pipe was actually kind of level. Like I said earlier, make sure there's no additional stress on either one of these bushings. Everything looks good by eye. I even went as far as measuring the distance with a tape measure. You guys might think that's a little crazy, but the best way to kind of visualize it with numbers. Measured from the center of this post to the center of that post, and it was about 2 1/4 inches on both sides. So I'm feeling pretty good about that as far as the new pipe being level as well. What I might actually do, I see that this bushing is kind of flexed forward a little bit. I might tap the pipe backwards a little bit just to kind of back off some pressure on that one. And then once that's in, once those front bushings are in all the way, and I'm going to start focusing on this rear part. Okay, so in the back here, I've left the rear bushing disconnected from the vehicle just so we can kind of pull down on the exhaust. And I have a little bit of wiggle room. So I'm going to pop the tailpipe section out. And what I'm going to do, like I said earlier, is get some muffler cement and kind of line it all on this inside edge here. Might not be 100% necessary, but since we're in here and we have it all apart, might as well, just to be on the safe side. And like I said, you don't want to go too crazy with this stuff, just enough to put a nice little layer on there, just to kind of complement the gasket. So we have our new gasket ready to go on. That's going to sit on the new section of the exhaust. There's a little lip that gasket's going to ride on, and it's going to keep it right in place. See if I can get you up there to show you. And there it is, ready for assembly. Last thing I'm going to do is hit those posts for the spring bolts with a little bit of copper anti-seize, just in case, you know, I got to work on this again in the future, which I hope I don't have to, at least not the exhaust. And then I think we'll be in pretty good shape. See if we can start these spring bolts by hand. Okay, so now that those two spring bolts are tightened down, everything's great at the flange. Now we can put on the final bushing here. I started it on the exhaust side, took it off the body side just because it was going to be easier to slide it past the post on the body and then kind of double back and work our way on just like that. So everything's looking pretty good. We've got our two spring bolts tightened back there, gaskets in place with the muffler cement. This hanger is now in place in the rear. We've got our two hangers in the middle in place as well. And then the exhaust is slid on pretty well up at the catalytic converter. So final step is to put on our clamp up here at the sleeve, and then we'll be ready to test it and make sure everything's good to go. Now for the muffler clamp here, I usually try to angle it so that the studs are pointing straight down. In some cases, you know, you'll get underneath the vehicle if there's a low point or anything like that. These studs, I don't know, maybe might catch on something. I don't think it really matters in this case. These are sitting pretty level with the thickness of the resonator here, and the muffler further back is sticking down further. So I'm not too worried about those hanging up on anything. We'll go ahead and mount it straight down, but you could, if you wanted to, you know, mount it off to the side, something like that, just to provide a little more clearance underneath the vehicle. Not really a big deal unless you're going off-roading or something like that. So for a daily driver like this, we're not too worried about it. Go ahead and put the top half on. Two nuts. I think I'll position that kind of halfway back on the sleeve. I want it far enough forward where it's going to bite into plenty of the catalytic converter, but still leave enough material here on the new pipe. So I'm feeling pretty good. Maybe just a hair more towards the front. I'm feeling good with that placement, so we'll go ahead and zip those down. And then as an added piece, we might put, you could put some muffler cement around this seam here where the sleeve overlaps. This is a pretty tight fit, so I'm not worried about it, but we'll double check everything afterwards. If for some reason there's a light exhaust leak coming from around here, then you can just pack some muffler cement in there, and you'll be good to go. So as you can see there, I had a chance to check out the new exhaust front to back. I'm not seeing any signs of a leak. Everything looks like it's sealed up pretty well front to back, so I'm feeling really great about it. And as you can see now, we're test driving the car. I'm not hearing anything. The exhaust is a lot quieter than it was driving it over here. So I'm feeling good about the repair. I'm sure my parents are going to be happy, and I think they'll pretty much wrap it up for this video. So thanks again for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Until next time, take it easy.